I now call to order the Society's 2,482nd meeting in what is now the 152nd year since its founding on March 13, 1871. Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
My name is Laurie Milstein. I am the president of PSW, one of the oldest scientific societies of Washington, D.C., committed to providing a forum to further scientific understanding and inquiry. Welcome to our members, guests, and friends, including everyone here in the Powell Auditorium, at the Cosmos Club, and everyone on YouTube tuning into the live stream of tonight's PSW meeting. Tonight's lecture will be by Laurie Locascio on the National Institute of Science of Standards and Technology. The Society is grateful to PSW full year series sponsors, PSW Mike Hilton and Hilton Associates LLC, and the Policy Studies Organization. In cooperation with the American Public University, and thank you, Paul, it's in the back of the room, and some other people from PSO, and we really appreciate your support. So let's have a round of applause for them. We're also grateful to PSW member Tim Thomas for his generous support of the fall lecture series, and Tim is here, so thank you, Tim. And finally, we're grateful to the sponsors of tonight's lecture, PSW members Robin Taylor and Larry Milstein, and I'm not going to ask you to clap for me. Oh, thank you all. I am pleased to announce the following new members. Kelly Corin, a physician with the U.S. Navy interested in ancient medicine and medical innovation and communication, neurodevelopment and space exploration, among other subjects, who learned of PSW from searching the web. And tonight's speaker, Laurie Locascio, who learned of PSW from the invitation to speak here tonight, and whose interest will be clear in some small part from tonight's lecture. We welcome them all to membership. Now, Janice Soreth will now present the minutes of the 2,481st meeting and the lecture by Yuichi Tsuda on JAXA's Hayabusa 2 asteroid sample return mission to Ryugu, prepared by Recording Secretary Cameo Lance. Janice, the stage is yours.
Thank you, Larry. Good evening. On September 22nd, 2023, in the Powell Auditorium of the Cosmos Club in Washington, D.C., and by live stream on the PSW Science YouTube channel, President Larry Milstein called the 2,481st meeting of the Society to order at 8:02 p.m. Eastern Time. He began by welcoming attendees, thanking sponsors for their support, and announcing new members. Mark Clampin then read the minutes of the previous meeting and the lecture by Tabitha Dotson on the Draco project, prepared by Recording Secretary Cameo Lance. Without comments, the minutes were approved as read. President Milstein then introduced the speaker for the evening, Yuichi Tsuda, project manager for the Hayabusa 2 project of the Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency. His lecture was entitled Hayabusa 2, Surveys and Samples from Asteroid Ryugu and Beyond. Tsuda began by thanking the Society and saying he was honored to speak. He said that his lecture would cover the story of the Hayabusa 2 asteroid return mission and its significant outcomes. He noted that as a guidance, navigation, and control engineer, the engineering aspects of the mission excited him the most. But he said he would talk about the scientific results as well. To begin the lecture, he played the video of the second successful touchdown of Hayabusa 2 on asteroid Ryugu. He emphasized that there were 2 touchdowns performed by the one spacecraft. He then placed the mission in the context of JAXA's overall space exploration efforts, giving an overview of JAXA's missions to the moon, planets, and small bodies within the solar system. Dr. Tsuda then reviewed the timeline, key features, and scientific objectives of the Hayabusa 2 mission. He noted That spacecraft was the world's second sample return mission to a small body, and that the round trip took over 6 years. The primary scientific objective was to gather samples that would help us understand the history of the solar system and potentially provide clues to the origin of life. He then detailed the timeline and the specific maneuvers that the spacecraft had to undergo to reach Ryugu, collect samples, and return them to Earth. He discussed the spacecraft's instrumentalities and its instrumentation. He noted that Hayabusa 2 had 12 deployable components, including a re-entry capsule, a rover, a lander, and a small impactor. The speaker then discussed findings of the mission. He said that Hayabusa 2 found that Ryugu is a rocky, top-shaped asteroid with a rather bumpy surface and a rotational period just under 8 days. He noted that the rocky surface made it hard for the engineers to identify a good touchdown site. He showed pictures of a variety of models they made of the surface to help them locate the best places to land and obtain samples. And he showed a video of the lander being directed to the landing zone, explaining that it employed autonomous tracking systems and noting that the spacecraft was too far from Earth for real-time control from the ground. The audience applauded when the video showed successful touchdown. He mentioned that the origin of the name Ryugu is an ancient Japanese fairy tale, and that the team named geological features on Ryugu after additional fairy tales from around the world. He also noted that the pandemic caused its own difficulties for the 2020 return of the sample capsule back to Earth, but that these were overcome. He then showed an inspiring video of the team's activities in Australia to locate the sample capsule after it returned to Earth and transport it safely back to Japan. He discussed the initial analyses of the samples, pointing out that they found water and organic molecules, including some amino acids. He noted also that the amino acids found in the Ryugu samples were equally left and right-handed, in contrast to those in living organisms on Earth, which are always left-handed. He noted that the sample catalog had been open to the public and that the samples are being shared for further analyses. The speaker concluded the lecture with some remarks about NASA's OSIRIS-REx, which was scheduled to land just days after his lecture. He noted that he had had to stay in Japan for the return of the Ryugu sample capsule as head of the headquarters team. So he was particularly excited to be traveling to Utah the next day after his lecture at the invitation of NASA to be with a team that would be recovering the OSIRIS-REx capsule when it returned to Earth. After the lecture concluded, there was a Q&A period. A live stream viewer in Sweden asked whether there was any crowdsourcing for the mission, like there was with OSIRIS-REx, through which people assisted with mapping the surface of Bennu. The speaker answered that OSIRIS-REx had a larger camera, which changed the engineering challenges. The Hayabusa 2 mission did not use crowdsourcing, but instead frequently flew close to the surface to take higher resolution images to make navigation decisions. Another member recalled that there was a film made about the Hayabusa 1 mission and asked whether there will be one about Hayabusa 2. Tsuda replied that the Hayabusa 1 was in 3 films, and furthermore, that mission was beset with rather dramatic engineering troubles. Hayabusa 2, he said, didn't really have such problems, and while there were some scientific challenges, these apparently were less exciting to the public. Hence, there have been no offers to date to make a movie about Hayabusa 2. Another member asked if the Hayabusa 2 team used stereoscopic imaging to help understand the surface topology, as was done for OSIRIS-REx and Bennu, and if so, was Brian May involved? The speaker said they hadn't used stereoscopic imaging to map the surface, but they had worked with May and used that approach for other purposes too. After the question and answer period, President Milstein thanked the speaker and presented him with a PSW ribbon with signed copies of the announcement of his talk and of Volume 1 of the PSW Bulletin. He then announced the speakers for upcoming lectures, made several housekeeping announcements, and invited guests to join the society. The meeting was then adjourned at 9:56 p.m. The weather was a slight drizzle. Audience included 53 in person and 32 on the live stream, and views of the video in the past 2 weeks were 309. Respectfully submitted, yours truly, Janice Sareth, on behalf of Recording Secretary Cameo Lance. Larry, back to you.
Are there any corrections or comments on the minutes? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion for the minutes to be accepted as read. A second. All members in favor? All members opposed? The minutes are accepted as read and will be posted to the website in due course. We now turn to tonight's lecture by Laurie Locascio on the National Institute of Standards and Technology. She is the 17th Director of NIST and the 4th Undersecretary of Commerce for Standards and Technology. She is responsible for all of NIST's operations, including over 3,400 employees and an annual budget over $1 billion. Previously, she was Vice President for Research at the University of Maryland College Park and the University of Maryland Baltimore, and also was Professor of both Bioengineering and Pharmacology. Before joining UMD, Laurie worked at NIST for 31 years, where she led the Materials Measurement Laboratory and for a time served as Acting Associate Director for Laboratory Programs. Her research is focused on microfluidics and microfluidic devices, including microassays and on lab-on-a-chip devices. She's published over 115 scientific papers and received 12 patents in the field of bioengineering and analytical chemistry. Among many other honors and awards, she is a Fellow of the National Academy of Inventors, the American Chemical Society, and the American Institute for Medical and Biological Engineering. And she is the recipient of the ACS Barnes Award for Leadership, the Department of Commerce Silver and Bronze Medal Awards, the ACS Analytical Chemistry Findus Award, and the NIST Safety and Applied Research Awards. She earned a BS in Chemistry at James Madison University, an MS in Bioengineering at the University of Utah, and a PhD in Toxicology at the University of Maryland Baltimore. All questions will be fielded after the lecture during the Q&A session. Laurie, the stage is yours. And I didn't know this, but I'm told that she was just inducted into the National Academy of Engineering. So let's have a round of applause.
Thank you. I was really excited about that. It was such an honor, but thank you. It's such a pleasure to be here, and thank you all. I had a very stimulating few hours already, just talking through dinner about fluid mechanics and AI and the CHIPS Act. And a lot of those things I'll get to. I won't get to anything that I did in my personal research, but I want to tell you a little bit about NIST and who we are. And I have to say, it's such an honor to be here. So I look forward to your questions after this talk. I wanted to say first that NIST is one of these truly amazing institutions. So who's been to NIST? Oh, look at that. Okay, so you can tell me, NIST is a really amazing institution, right? It's the best of how government scientists can come together with the private sector for mutual benefit. And it's filled with so many different creative people. And it's really my role as director of NIST to enhance the ability of our scientists to conduct the world-class research that they're already conducting, and to ensure that NIST continues to excel in its mission for the benefit of the nation. Now, it is NIST, in the most fundamental way, exists to build trust in new technologies and old technologies, truthfully. We do measurement science, improving your ability to measure things. And really, no discovery can happen if you can't measure it, right? And so even incremental improvements in how we can measure improve our ability to discover and improve our ability to make sure that products can come to market, and that we believe and understand how things work and the quality by which they're doing that work. So if you look at the field of biology, which moved from a qualitative science in the last 30 to 40 years to a data-driven science, a lot of that is because all of a sudden we can do great measurements, right? Now, measurements are critical to knowing your discovery is right. They're critical to knowing your technology is robust. They're critical to knowing your product can compete in the global marketplace. So I want to go way back to 1901 and talk about a little story that, since I am the 2,482nd, is that right, speaker or something in this meeting. I want to tell a little story from the last century, or the 1901, and how NIST came to be and some of the ways that we were impactful immediately. So we were born in 1901. We've had a mission on in measurement science since then. And at that time, trains were derailing due to the fact that there was no quality control on the metal alloys that went into making the wheels. And so the wheels would fracture. And that caused about 4,000 derailments a year, resulting in about 13,000 deaths annually. NIST developed well-characterized materials. They moved into the foundries that people could test against, and as a result, the quality of the alloys went up, the wheels became better, and derailments went down, right, due to the fracturing of the wheels. And so we added significantly to the quality of life. But really what that's about is people could then trust the quality of the product because of our work. And people could trust the trains that they got on as a result of our work. It was truly transformational. So the areas we work in have evolved since 1901 in the 122 years that we've been here, but we're still there to promote trust in technology. And now we do it in areas like quantum science and AI and cyber-physical systems. So I want to start with some basic facts about NIST. Since a lot of you have been there, you may not know what you've seen, but NIST has a workforce, as was mentioned. Larry said we have about 3,400 people on campus who are federal employees. Altogether, we have about 7,000 people because we double our workforce with visiting scientists, guest researchers, postdocs, students. It's a great mix because it really creates vibrancy on our campus and a lot of infusions of new ideas. Our distinguished group of researchers and staff has many impressive accolades, include that someone in the audience who won one of our 5 Nobel Prizes, Bill Phillips. And our work collectively generates thousands of publications, research publications. Our main campuses are in Gaithersburg, that's probably the one most of you have been in, Gaithersburg, Maryland, and Boulder, Colorado, with smaller sites in South Carolina and New York. But we really have a presence across the entire country because the way that we do our work is we work with everyone. Truthfully, we work with academia and other government agencies, really the best in industry, and the best scientists and technologists in the world are people that we collaborate with. And so we have incredible partnership models that leverages expertise against our own expertise from our scientists and engineers. And that really enhances in our impact and keeps, I guess, again, vibrant with a lot of new ideas and perspectives. So we achieve our mission through 3 broad program areas. I'm not going to show you a bunch of org charts, but I want to give you a flavor of what we do. And then I'm going to really go into some of our priority areas. So we operate world-class laboratory programs, and there we conduct breakthrough scientific and engineering research, as well as offering calibration services and standards that are essential to industry really doing their job and manufacturers doing their job. Our laboratory programs have been the core of who we are since 1901. They are the core of our impact and our work. But in recent decades, our work has really expanded, and we've expanded our impact through a variety of extramural programs, and that's in the innovation and industry service area. A lot of that includes manufacturing programs, and I had a really good discussion about manufacturing itself at the table today. But the manufacturing programs bring together stakeholders from public and private sectors to try to promote a reinvigorated manufacturing in the United States. And then last year, we've added to our work the landmark CHIPS and Science Act of 2022. Now, that laid $50 billion on top of NIST programs. We're a $1.6 billion agency. And we are managing this program to bring back manufacturing in the semiconductor area back to the United States, but also build a really robust R&D ecosystem to support that. So I'd like to say here that we really work across the continuum from basic research to applied research to standards development to manufacturing. And then a lot of the work that we do really leverages itself into federal policy. Okay, now I have to say, maybe not many people say this, but I love our mission. I mean, I'm the director of the agency. I have to love our mission, but I think it's the coolest mission because it's all about promoting U.S. innovation and industrial competitiveness. It is about ensuring the nation's economic security in the context of a very complicated global economy. I left NIST for about 5 years to go to academia, as was mentioned. But coming back, it's really this mission and this critical time for the United States and the incredible dedicated people that really brought me home. And I want to put this mission in the context of our current national need. Now, right before President Biden came into office, the Council on Competitiveness, that you may know of, released a report. It was called Competing in the Next Economy. Now, at the beginning of the report, it states, I'm going to read this, at the same time the United States faces unprecedented opportunity for progress, it also must confront a new set of competitive realities. A rapidly strengthening China seeks global technology leadership as part of its quest to become the world's economic, military, and geopolitical leader. And something here that I think is really interesting, and the shaper of the foundational rules of our next global economy. Now that's a very meaningful statement. There's a lot on the line here, not just who develops the next best widget, but really how do we compete in today's global economy, and then what's the result? And so there's a lot of discussion around government, around how do we compete. And even though I've seen this graph 1,000 times, I'm still amazed when I see the data that talks about investments that are made in China compared to the United States in R&D. It's a clear priority for that country. It hasn't shown to be a clear priority for the United States, and we need a strategy for competing in the global economy, especially with regard to our support for scientific R&D for now and in the future. So this graph ends in 2019. That is getting even more accelerated, the investments overseas as compared to the United States investments. But against this backdrop, at NIST, knowing our mission is really in this space of competing in this global economy, we developed a number of scientific and technical priorities for NIST. And many of these priorities arose from the alignment between NIST's strengths and our mission, but also our national priorities, particularly as they relate to global competitiveness and economic security. And so these should be pretty obvious to you. Our scientific and technical priorities are critical and emerging technologies leadership, standards leadership, and manufacturing leadership, including chips. So I'm going to sort of break these down just talk about the three. The first one is critical and emerging technologies leadership. I'm going to spend quite a bit of time on this because I want to go through some of our priorities in this space. But we do have this vision that NIST is and remains essential in the development, the manufacture, and the adoption of technologies that are critical not only to today, but really those that are yet to be imagined. And we have done this for our entire lifetime, and I'll give you some examples of how we have impacted critical and emerging technologies. But while there are many, many lists across the world of top critical and emerging technologies, and many in the United States and different government agencies, you'll see a top 10 list, I think, on everybody's website. These are the ones that we are focusing on and prioritizing. And the first is artificial intelligence, and that includes trustworthy, transparent AI and machine learning and the important applications of AI. Next, biotechnology and engineering biology to impact health, agriculture, and industrial sectors. The next is cybersecurity and privacy to enable the development and deployment of emerging technologies. The next one, advanced communications, 6G and beyond, and wireless technologies. Energy technologies, generation, storage, distribution of secure, climate-friendly, and efficient utilization of energy. And then finally, last but not least, and one of my favorites, is quantum information science, leveraging quantum mechanics for the storage, transmission, manipulation, computing, or measurement of information. And so we developed this list of critical and emerging technologies that were our favorites about over 8 to 10 years ago. And now we're starting to think about what's next, what's beyond this list. So let's talk a little bit about why it's important that NIST plays in this space. First of all, it's a clear national need, right, to promote and quicken the development of emerging technologies in light of the global competition landscape, but also to make sure that we can cement them here in the United States, that whatever is developing, we can ensure that, that those technologies are successful. So a challenge ahead for us in the United States is that the United States has an innovation ecosystem that is market-driven and bottom-up. It's worked very, very well for us, right, for our existence. But our biggest competitor on the global stage has an innovation ecosystem that is top-down and autocratic. The rules are different, right? So all of a sudden we have a competitor. A lot of our other competitors, over the years, over the decades, have really had rules that are the same. Now the rules are very, very different. So how do you compete there? We have opportunities for NIST to play a strategic role for government, and the reason why I feel strongly that we will play in this space very well is that we are a strong collaborator. We have the trust of industry, academia, and government, and we really work with them across different spaces to assess needs and really fill gaps in knowledge and fill gaps then also in their ability to translate that into technologies that can make it to the marketplace. Now, often, as I said, NIST does work with industry to understand their needs and then work across the continuum, as I said, from basic and applied research to standards to manufacturing to fill those gaps. But I'll also say that we have led programs that have driven new industries throughout our history, and including most recently in quantum, where our work over decades has formed the underpinning, I'll say boldly, of the emerging quantum market. And while we still do groundbreaking research, particularly with our partners at the University of Maryland, University of Colorado, we are also supporting the nascent quantum industry and the associated supply chains through something that we call the Quantum Economic Development Consortium. Now, the worst thing that we can possibly do at a time when industry is nascent, like quantum, is to ignore the fact that energy still needs to go into these industries to drive them to market and to keep them here in the United States. And we learned that lesson with semiconductors. I'm going to get to that example at the end when I talk about the CHIPS and Science Act. But that's something that we can't do. We can't invent things here and then lose them. It doesn't matter to which country. We just don't want to lose them from the United States, right? We want that to benefit us, benefit our economy, benefit our science and engineers, so they can continue to iterate. So let me go into a little detail about some of the technologies that I pointed out. And I'm going to start with AI. I had a great discussion about AI as I said, at the little reception at the beginning. Now, with the rapid advances in AI technology, there's also increasing interest in the vast benefits of AI. We talked about the multiple ways we know that AI is in many of our systems, but also increasing concerns about the potential harms of AI. And if you are reading the newspaper in Washington, you see that that's been the subject of many discussions in Congress and the White House. And NIST has been a leader in cultivating trust in the design and the development and the use and the governance of AI through our AI program. We have a robust research portfolio to promote, whose whole goal is to promote trustworthy and responsible AI. So our research and our expertise, we engage with all the experts in the world, and we develop guidance and tools and frameworks that other people can use to understand and evaluate their own AI systems to see if they're trustworthy. Earlier this year, we released something called the AI Risk Management Framework. That is becoming a very well-known document. It talks about how do you really look at the risks that AI poses, and how do you determine how to mitigate those risks. So we have a long history of devising and developing and revising metrics and measurement tools, and now we're applying that to AI. So I'd love to talk more about that. This year, NIST established and administers the National AI Advisory Committee to advise the U.S. government on opportunities and challenges related to AI. But we also recently convened a generative AI public working group, and that's to start thinking about, okay, now we have these large language models that in ChatGPT and others, how do we instill confidence in generative AI, but also how do we understand where the risks are? So that's a subject of a lot of discussion right now at NIST and around government. The next area that I want to talk about, and I'll make these a little bit shorter, is biotechnology and biomanufacturing. So this was where I did most of my research. NIST has not had a robust program in biotechnology and biomanufacturing until about maybe the late 1980s. When we realized that there wasn't a government agency that was really helping to step in and do QA, QC, or develop new measurement techniques that could evaluate new emerging biopharmaceuticals. And so that's really kind of how we were born, or how we started working in this area. Our laboratory programs are focused on R&D enabling biotechnology, biosecurity, and data analytics, as well as the measurements and the data and the standards that can help advance biotechnologies into the marketplace, into successful products. And so you see on the left-hand side a few of our established programs. One of the first is biopharmaceutical biomanufacturing, still the subject of a lot of attention today. As a matter of fact, there was a bioeconomy executive order that's shown here on the right-hand side that put NIST squarely in the middle of trying to make sure that the United States has a robust bioeconomy and biomanufacturing capability. The next area is industrial biotechnology, and finally, regenerative medicine. And in all of these, again, we're developing the foundational tools to assure the quality of these products. And these foundational research efforts ultimately led to highly characterized standards that provide industry with the ability to QA, QC their work. And so I show 4 different areas that we're working in here. The first is GIAB. That is genome in a bottle. It actually is a genome in a bottle that we package. It's highly well characterized, that people use to enable translation of whole genome sequencing to clinical practice and to innovations in technologies. The next one is genetically modified yeast that provides an innocuous living material for biosecurity training for first responders. And then one of our most tested materials and requested materials at NIST is this NIST monoclonal antibody. It's a highly structurally characterized antibody that is used to assist in the development of and safety and production of monoclonal antibody drugs. And this is the biggest market for really any kind of therapeutic in the United States. And then the last is the NIST CHO, which is our first living reference material. It's a living cell line that produces monoclonal antibodies, and people can use that to benchmark the production of monoclonal antibodies in cells, and cells in this case are like the living factory that are producing the drug. The next area that I wanted to mention is cybersecurity and privacy. So in this area, we, for the last decade, have become very well known for our work in cybersecurity risk management. In fact, this goes back 50 years, though. Our first research in cybersecurity was 50 years ago. And about 10 years ago, we developed the cybersecurity framework that is really, again, like the AI risk management framework, let's think about the risks posed to your systems and how do you manage those risks. And so our work includes guidances and frameworks that help you figure that out. Like, how do you make your systems resilient, and how do you tighten up your defenses so you don't get hacked, right? So we developed the guidance that helps companies and institutions protect the privacy, protect the security of their systems, but also we develop guidance and documents that help people protect their privacy. And of course, today, privacy is very, very difficult to protect in light of many new ways to gather the data that you are exposing on your own social media and in every interaction that you do on the web. So that's something that we're very well known for as well. Okay, let's move to advanced communication. So next generation communications, of course, a vast technology space, from manufacturing to transportation to public safety. And NIST plays a key role to ensure that American industry is well positioned globally to compete in this market space and also to meet the rising market demand for broadband technologies. So our advanced communication research, I'll just touch on a few of these. We develop world-class measurement techniques that are essential to accessing and utilizing and sharing the radio spectrum necessary to make the 5G systems that are deployed in the United States viable, and of course viable in an ultra-competitive and worldwide marketplace. We also have a public safety communications research division, and they are the primary laboratory for conducting research and development and testing and evaluations of public safety communications technologies. Our ultimate goal for public safety communications is to make sure new technologies get to the first responders. So one example is our work in AR/VR. We are testing with the first responders to see if we can incorporate AR/VR into their rescue mission, so that they don't have to walk into a burning building without understanding the building layout. And so it's there for protecting them and there to try to increase the technology capabilities of first responders to protect them and to protect the people inside. We have a lot of work on core networks. We conduct work on spectrum sharing and sensing. Sensing. Spectrum is, of course, a limited national resource, and so our work is try to figure out how to reduce or increase the efficiency of spectrum sharing and working with many in academia and other government agencies for that work. Energy technologies, we're also a leader in energy technologies research. As the U.S. continues to adapt to more renewable and cleaner energies, there's need for consistent standards and measurements. And so NIST has been involved with this for many, many years. An essential application of this research is alternative energy sources. We have a long history of working in solar voltaic technology, and as this industry continues to grow, there is a similar need for the development of standards. And we recently developed a standard reference instrument. It's a calibrated solar cell. And products like this really enable calibration of industry measurements, and then reliable calculations on energy output and efficiency. We also study the efficiency in the second box on utilities and the grid. And this is a picture of our net zero residential test facility. It's a fully operational house on NIST Gaithersburg campus. The house was designed to be highly efficient, and in the first year of operation, the house net exported energy to the grid rather than the estimated $4,400 a family living in the house would have to pay for electricity. So it's really a test facility. It's not occupied. It's not my house. Like, I don't get a house on campus. A lot of people have asked me that. Nobody lives there, but they do constantly have like hair dryers running and washing machines running. Everything that a normal family would do goes on in this house every day, except nobody goes in there. And we just do work estimating how efficiently we can get that to the grid and how well it can be utilized. So we also have many other research areas that I won't talk about, but they encompass traditional fuels and also alternative and renewable fuels. And as we shift to technologies like hydrogen-powered cars and planes, it's just as important that we are there making sure that these new fuels conform to standards and are safe to use. I mean, I think we all know when we get on a plane, and if we start to use alternative fuels, we want to make sure that, you know, there is some, they're safe to use and they conform to standards. And the last thing that I'm going to talk about is quantum information sciences and technology. I'm really proud to be sitting here with two tremendous, incredible, brilliant NIST scientists who are leaders in quantum area. And we have, for decades, had a leadership role in quantum science and engineering and quantum science and technology. And we also have a leadership role in government and are involved in the reauthorization right now of the National Quantum Initiative Act, which of course provides an overarching framework to strengthen and coordinate quantum information sciences across the United States government, but also across private sector and the academic community. Now, the NQI, when it was passed, gave NIST some specific functions to perform. And one of them I mentioned earlier is develop a consortium that can really support this nascent industry. But we have, and the new reauthorization now includes language for really transitioning our work from basic quantum science into quantum engineering. So we have been, as I said, been working in this field for many, many years and have leadership roles, and we're excited about the reauthorization of the National Quantum Initiative so we can really expand our work in that area. Now, I wanted to mention for a minute post-quantum cryptography. This is another area where NIST demonstrates its long-standing expertise in critical and emerging technologies at the intersection here of quantum information science and cybersecurity. So this is one example of bringing the two together. There is so much excitement about having a quantum computer that can power up our ability to process data and to answer some of the hardest questions that are out there. But the excitement also brings risk. Again, I'll bring in a little risk of quantum computers having the ability to bypass current encryption methodologies. And that is a severe cybersecurity risk to both the public and the private sector. And so we've been working on the development of algorithms for post-quantum cryptography that can protect our information. We're in the process. We had a competition that we've been running since 2016 to develop these algorithms. And we are now in the process of drafting standards for 3 algorithms that were published in August. This is a big deal because that transition to post-quantum cryptography is going to take a lot of time and a lot of resources to do that migration. A lot of people are paying attention to this very closely. As a matter of fact, I went to a conference and I ran into the CEO of Intel, and he asked me, when are those standards coming out? Now that, I was like, do you know who I am? I thought that was pretty interesting. So people are watching. They're really excited about this and really interested in how we're going to do that migration. I'm going to spend a lot less time on the next 2, but let me talk for a minute about that, because remember I had 3 priorities. The first one, critical and emerging technologies, second, standards, and the third, manufacturing. Let me talk a minute about standards leadership. So at NIST, we work in a couple different types of standards. I talked at the beginning about the train derailments, and I said we developed, these metal alloys that people could test against and make sure their alloys had the right characteristics. So that's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about those kind of standards, those kind of materials. We call them standard reference materials. What I'm talking about are documentary standards. Right, so documentary standards that are there for manufacturing quality, for health and safety, and global interoperability, which is the subject of a lot of fierce competition when you're talking about the internet and when you're talking about 5 and 6G. So here I'm going to focus on international documentary standards, which actually, even though standards is our middle name at NIST, it's the first time a NIST director has ever made this a priority. Now, the people at NIST participate on 3,000 different international and national standards bodies, committees, and yet it's really never been a priority. However, an analysis that was done by the International Trade Administration found that approximately 93% of all global trade is affected by standards, right? So you can't get to the marketplace very easily if you don't conform to standards. So this has a big impact on where you sell, what you do, what technologies make it to market, which ones are really successful, right, globally. Our vision and goal is really that NIST leads effective execution of the U.S. government's first national standard strategy. They just released it this year. When they released it, it's the U.S. National Standard Strategy for Critical and Emerging Technology. The people in my organization keep trying to give me an acronym for that, and it's like, what is it? USGNSSCET, and I can't do that. I mean, it doesn't make any sense to me. So I'm going to read it out to you. It makes a lot of sense. It's the first U.S. government strategy for standards. They've never had one before. And it's really solely based on critical and emerging technology because they understand that the White House understands that we need to be leaders in standards in order to succeed in the global marketplace. So the reasons why NIST needs to be involved is in the development of international standards and trying to promote international standards leadership is that, standards are clearly a part of both national and economic security. We've had new strategies that have been released by the US, the EU, and China, all wanting to be strategic with regard to how they play in the international standards arena. And you know, over the last several decades, the U.S. has done really well here without even really, you know, having a national standard strategy, right? The U.S. has led in the development of international standards that are both favorable to U.S. stakeholders while at the same time ensuring open access to global markets. And they've been really good for our partners, too, and our allies. And the U.S. economy has benefited greatly from this market power with broad adoption of standards. So you're starting to see other countries get that, right? They see that maybe our success was really based on our ability to be there, to be present. And so we're starting to see a lot of other economies in the world declare they want to be the gold standard in the world, and they want to send a lot more people to the table to lead in standards development. So there's differences in the approach that China, EU, and the U.S. have taken. I'll just mention the EU. The EU has a very top-down approach to standards that stem from a highly regulatory approach that the EU generally has. We released our standards strategy in May of this year, as I said. It's a really open approach. First of all, it supports the way that we've always done it, which is to support the private sector-led approach to standards development. But it focuses on a couple things, which I think are brilliant. It focuses on the fact that we need really good R&D in order to be present at the standards table to promote the best technical solutions. And I love that about that. And it also says we want everyone to be at the table with us. So it's a big opportunity. It's inclusive. It does not prevent anyone from playing in the international standards arena with us. And I think it's something that I'm excited about. I'm excited that they released. And we are, and after the White House released it, they asked NIST to lead the implementation. In the United States, NIST researchers are major contributors to standards. We work with our partners and our stakeholders in ISO, IEC, ITU. We work, of course, with ANSI, for those of you who are familiar with standards. But we also work on the international level with the EU in the US-EU Trade and Technology Council. We work within the Quad, which is US, Australia, India, and Japan. We work within the OECD, and then we also work within the IPEF to promote international standards engagement. So I'll finish with that and then move on to manufacturing. And I hope the only thing that I can say about standards at this, or I know the only thing I want to say about standards to end, is we need all the big brains at the table when we're developing standards. It's not only science and technology solutions, though, it's also diplomacy. And that really unique, rare combination. It's a pretty interesting place to be, and I love to see the scientists that step up to that. Okay, the next priority and the last one is manufacturing leadership. And our goal there is that we're the one-stop shop for practical tools and services and measurement expertise that can accelerate competitiveness and impact. And so we have 3 programs that I want to talk about. I want to talk about, very briefly, Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership and Manufacturing USA. And then I'm going to spend a little time on chips. All right, so Hollings Manufacturing Extension Partnership, or MEP, it's a pretty unique asset for NIST. It's kind of a consulting service. We are in every single state in Puerto Rico, out there trying to help small and medium-sized manufacturers figure out the best way to innovate solutions and become more competitive in their manufacturing processes. MEP has helped manufacturers generate billions of dollars in sales and cost savings, as well as the creation and retention of more than 100,000 jobs around the United States. Manufacturing USA, how many people are familiar with Manufacturing USA? Are you familiar with that? So it was born under President Obama. There were 16 institutes, now there are 17 institutes. These 17 institutes are run by NIST, DOE, and DOD, primarily DOE and DOD. NIST only has one, but we do run the network, which is really to coordinate and bring people together to talk about manufacturing challenges. See the dots on that map? There are about 2,000 different participants in Manufacturing USA through these 17 institutes. And their goal is to try to develop better ways to do advanced manufacturing in this country. And so that's all I'm going to say about the two other programs. In my last 5 to 7 minutes, I want to talk about NIST's newest program, and it's a big one. It's CHIPS. And as I said, CHIPS is a $52 billion program that was signed into law and then by President Biden on August 9th, a fateful day last year. We just had our first anniversary. It's $52 billion. $50 billion of that went to the Department of Commerce and NIST to manage. And so now I want to talk about why this is so important. So CHIPS for America is a big bet by the U.S. government on U.S. science and technology. I'll just say that. And we do have several examples in our history where the U.S. government has made big bets in the U.S. science and technology enterprise. We know these well, but they are few and far between. The first that I wanted to bring up is the Manhattan Project, which was formalized by President Roosevelt and in order to beat the Germans at that time to a nuclear weapon. And there's a lot of renewed debate, of course, on nuclear weapons as a result of the movie Oppenheimer. A whole new generation understands and knows about this. I don't really want to debate that now, but what I do want to note is that after the war, the United States committed to continuing to fund nuclear research and development. This program did attract top scientific talent from across the world, and even the young people now who've just seen Oppenheimer know that, brought them together to solve a really big problem, built new scientific facilities across the nation that ultimately led us to lead in nuclear and energy research for decades to come. So really a lot of follow-ons to that, and again, we can debate the initial impetus, but the follow-ons were really profound on the U.S. science and technology enterprise. The program was first funded in 1942. It cost an estimated $367 billion in today's dollars. Then, 20 years later is when I think we had the next big bet, which was President Kennedy announcing a project to put a man on the moon. When he announced it in a very famous speech, he said, "I believe we possess all the resources and the talents necessary. But the facts of the matter are that we have never made the national decisions or marshaled the national resources required for such leadership. And we have never specified long-range goals on such an urgent time schedule or managed our resources or our time so as to ensure their fulfillment." The project showed it inspired generations to come. I think even when I looked at that last speaker, I was like, oh my gosh, space, right? So I think I grew up in that era, and it inspired me to become a scientist. But the cost in today's dollars, $230 billion. Then another 30 years goes by before I would pick out this as a big bet. 30 years later, President Bush's term, the Human Genome Project launched. This was a big bet. It was funded with an estimated cost in today's dollars of $7 billion. But wow, it unlocked the potential of genomics. for understanding and treating disease. It led to new tools that we never thought possible for genome sequencing. It catapulted new industries. It resulted in many genomics technology companies. The global genome sequencing market in 2022 was about $28 billion, with the US leading at about 42% of revenue share in 2021. This does not account for all the other markets that came as a result of this big bet that only cost us $7 billion in today's dollars, right? Big bets. Okay, Chips for America. We're here 30 years again, right? Decades before the government makes big bets on science and technology. You might argue with me. There might be some other ones you want to pick out. But this time, to reclaim our leadership in advanced semiconductor electronics through the CHIPS Act. Bipartisan legislation, right? Signed into law by President Biden, but bipartisan legislation. Cost in today's dollars is $52 billion. So this is really my last slide. This act provides the Department of Commerce and NIST with $50 billion over the next 5 years. $39 billion is meant to bring manufacturing back to the United States. Now, this technology was invented here, but with globalization, we decided we didn't need to have it here. We learned a hard lesson during COVID that really that vulnerability of not making things here is really stretches us. And so this is to bring back manufacturing. $11 billion is for R&D programs, because why are the manufacturers going to stay here if they aren't getting the great innovations out of us to support them, right? To support the next incredible device. So I always say $39 billion to attract them back, and $11 billion to keep them here. We need to create a very robust workforce development program that really cuts across all of these to ensure that we have the highly skilled workers. We anticipate with $52 billion, we're going to create a couple 100,000 new jobs. And so we've got a lot of work to do, got a lot of eyes on us. A lot has happened in the past year with regard to where we are and trying to bring these companies back, and where we are with regard to developing the R&D ecosystem. We've still got a lot of work to do, so stay tuned. Happy to answer any question about where we are today. We are really proud to be the agency responsible for this big bet, for this big job. I think it came to us because of our strong reputation in science and technology, but also the reputation that we'll get the job done, and we will. Now, before I end, we've been asked to do some really big things for the nation. I think a lot of science and technology agencies have. This is an incredible time of rapidly advancing technologies. So all of us in the federal enterprise have a lot of work to do partnering with industry and partnering with academia. But the interesting thing is, I sort of flashed back to post-World War II, when we were starting to build the infrastructure for a lot of the research facilities in the country. Now, I don't know how often you visit the research facilities in the country that belong to the national labs or the federal labs, but they're post-war facilities, right? So not only did we invest in the science, we built that research infrastructure. We built the buildings, right? Well, we don't do that anymore. And as a matter of fact, I'll just say that we have at NIST a backlog of $2 billion for our facilities in maintenance alone. The National Academies did a study on us and just talked about the loss in productivity and time because our scientists are band-aiding buildings to get the work done. It's true across the federal enterprise. So my question for you is, we just had two important bills. We had the CHIPS Act and we had the Infrastructure Act, both bipartisan. Both could see these great things that we needed to do. My question is, can we once again invest in the science infrastructure that we need to rebuild the capabilities to make a thriving tech economy? And what will it take to get there? That's all. Thank you.
Okay, we have time for a few questions. If you have a question, please raise your hand.
I'm Bob Hershey, and I'm a member. Could you tell us a bit more about CHIPS?
Yeah, there's a lot to say about CHIPS. Let me be brief, because that could be a very long answer. I'll say that we are right now, our very first funding opportunity was around funding to bring back leading edge to the United States. And then we have follow-ons for mature node and current generation semiconductors. We had over 500 statements of interest from companies around the United States. And that is the early on estimates were much more than 10 times what we have. I mean, $52 billion is a lot, right? But the interest for really growing the capabilities in manufacturing in the United States, they're really high. They're really strong. That's great. So we've got a lot of great things that we're looking at, a lot of great statements of interest. We also are going to be funding not only the manufacturing of the semiconductor chips themselves, but also packaging facilities, because leading edge packaging is critical to advancing capabilities of microelectronics these days, as a lot of you know in the audience, and you probably could say a lot more about that, Bob, as well. And we're also funding suppliers, so material suppliers and critical instrument suppliers. We want to see great innovations there. We also have R&D. We're just starting to get, no money's been out the door. Let's just say that. Okay, no money went out the door yet, but we have built the capabilities and are accepting applications, and you'll be hearing a lot of fun news out of us very soon with regard to both sides, manufacturing facilities and R&D.
Hi, I'm Federica Derima.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for this end-to-end presentation about NIST and the various initiatives that you have. My question actually was also relating to chips. And many, many years ago, the US manufacturers, IBM, Intel, had very expensive facilities that were becoming even more expensive. So industry decided the return for the investment was small. So they started going even from the mid-80s. Japan, who is an ally, and Taiwan.
Yeah.
And actually, most of the chips, I mean, a very small percentage is manufactured anymore in the US. I believe Intel has a small, IBM is out of the business. NVIDIA produces the chips in Taiwan. We also have the geopolitical things that create problems. I will. So my question is, this enticement of manufacturers again, these are facilities that are many, many billions of dollars. Who are these manufacturers? And I know you cannot identify names, but maybe classes. And because also is the issue of sustainment, you know, creating small, we created the technology and we exported it. So is this, how is this going not to be repeated again? And the other thing is, which comes to standards, this was the National Bureau of Standards many, many years ago. And now it's NIST, of course. The standards are created in some ways where people vote with their feet. And if China becomes the dominant manufacturer, they can create the standards. They cannot be as they can choose not to be as cooperative as US has been. And so how does these standards also are in a sense safeguarded, or you know, the NIST's leadership or US leadership or EU leadership in standards can be maintained?
Yeah, I love all the parts of that question. I will say that who is applying? So anybody who wants to build in the United States, I don't want to say anybody, but most people who want to build in the United States are qualify, right? So it can be US companies, it can be international companies, and they can build in the United States. There are some guardrails around that. So those are those who qualify, and so you can imagine a lot of companies that might have interest, because we're funding not only leading edge but also mature and current generation mature node, and we are also building packaging right? Packaging capabilities, research facilities, materials suppliers facilities, instrument developer facilities. So we have a lot of different types of people who can apply, and we're seeing a lot of interest from many, many different areas globally. Standards. Yeah, a good question. You know, so you're absolutely right. We knew that years ago when we developed the semiconductor ecosystem in the United States. The standards were essential to us being successful, not only in the United States, but globally, that our companies would thrive if we could develop the standards and lead the development of standards. So that's really built into our program. We have a CHIPS metrology program, and it is really about, as a matter of fact, we just had a standards summit last week, and that is about let's play here. Let's make sure we are once again at the head of the standards table. Now, the interesting thing, but welcome everybody, because we want this to be a global solution. We want the best solutions to come forward, and we want it to be a global solution. I'll say that I think NIST does this very well. For instance, we have multiple consortia where we do pre-competitive research, pre-standardization research. One area is in communications technology, for instance, and we have 180 global companies participating, companies, institutions, companies, academia, and they come together, we develop a global solution. Well, by the time you get to the standards, right, table, everyone's like, yeah, this is the one. This is what we have to come up with. The semiconductors knew that years ago. We were very successful. We're following that model, and now we're trying to revive that model in the U.S. Now, the interesting thing is, we not only, when we lost manufacturing from the United States, we lost a lot of the R&D, because you can't, your PhD students want a job, right? And if we don't have the companies that are making the chips, the hardware, right? We lost the students. They all went to software. We're still the lead designers in the world. But we lost the hardware capabilities. We lost the researchers. Therefore, we lost the technical experts who could also be very influential at the standards table. So it's kind of a domino effect all across. Your very complex question. I loved it. Thank you. I hope I answered it.
All right, I'm gonna make a question sort of comment.
Sure.
So the supply chain for semiconductor manufacturing is very complicated, but there are some very, very weak links. In particular, for the latest generation of chips, there's exactly one manufacturer of the device that you need to actually do the fabrication, the photolithographic step. It's a Netherlands company. Is there a plan in the CHIPS program to have a competitor? And it's not very easy to develop these machines. That's why there's only one company that does it.
Yeah.
And so how do you address the innovation problem that you can throw a lot of money at things, but it doesn't necessarily result in the outcome that you're hoping to get?
Yeah, so first of all, we want collaboration too. We want to make sure that collaboration is an important part of the CHIPS program. So I would say, you know, the one question that I get often, and I know the company you're talking about, but the other question I get is, you know, there's an entity called IMEC in Belgium that works with a lot of companies, and they are a lead prototyping capability, research capability, ASML, and many other equipment manufacturers are there working with them. We want to collaborate. We want to collaborate with them. We've been very forthcoming about collaborating with them and global companies. Yeah, and at the same time, we have a venture component in our R&D funding where we want to see spin-offs. We want to see innovations, inventions, and we want to be able to pipeline them through our R&D entities. I said we have $11 billion for R&D. I can't say the exact amount, but multi-billions of that are going to go into the formation of a national semiconductor technology center, which is really going to be helping to prototype, like new prototyping capabilities. You mentioned that there were many prototyping capabilities. We don't have them anymore in this country. That also is a big damper on our ability to innovate, and that's one of the places where there will be hopefully incredible collaboration from those great companies in the world.
From the web.
Thanks, Larry. There are several members who have questions in the live chat. So I'll start with Jim, who's a member. How does NIST decide what efforts or programs to fund? And how do you respond to the free market position?
That's a really great question. So we do both. I mean, we respond to national needs. I would say that's the first thing that we do is respond to national needs. But we also have so many incredibly brilliant science and technology folks at NIST who are out there scanning the field, right? They're out there talking, meeting with academia, industry, government. I think that swirl really allows us to not only, first of all, just respond to markets, but then create markets, right? So we can do the research, establish research programs, and we do have some discretionary fund that we set aside every year to make sure we push that back into our research program so we can be present at the beginning of fields when they're developing, because one day those fields should be hopefully developing into an emerging market, and we need to be there at the beginning of the game to make sure that that technology is alive and can thrive in the United States and in the global marketplace. So we think early about basic research, but we also respond to national needs. If there's a need that the White House or Congress brings to our attention, we respond to that as well. And so our programs are really built up in a number of different ways, from the bottom up and also from the top down through government. Because of our interaction with industry, we have an eye on industry needs. And you talked about market demands. We do have our eye on industry needs, and a lot of times we justify our programs, not all of our programs, but a lot of our programs, according to what the industry needs are of the time.
Another question from the web.
And a couple of follow-on questions then. What aspects of Chinese industrial policy give them competitive advantage versus the U.S.?
I did mention that China is very top-down and autocratic in their approach. So they provide a lot of funding and set goals that are very, very strong and long range. So that's a little bit different from how we operate, right? We're very bottoms up. We are also our one-year funding cycles. It's just different. We operate very differently in the United States. How does that? I don't want to say that's a competitive advantage for China, but I will say they're competing very well. And now we have a global competitor who operates very differently from us. So how's that going to change the game globally? And so we have an incredible ecosystem that has allowed us to thrive for years. I think it's just good to step back and say, okay, it's different. Now we have never had a competitor like this. They think differently. So how do we respond to that? And a lot of people are having that debate right now.
And another question from Jim, as a member, as NIST labs produce scientific or engineering advances, how does NIST control the resulting intellectual property to ensure that it primarily benefits the U.S.?
That's a good question. So we have a robust tech transfer program. So we're required, if we have inventions, to patent and to license our technology. That's basically, like all federal agencies, that's what we are required to do. And we do that. Actually, I have 12 patents all through NIST. Some successful, some not so successful, but all supported by the work that I did there, and then all those patents were developed through NIST and licensed through NIST.
My name is Al Ehrlich. I am a member. I was just wondering about standards, which I know very little about, which is why I'm asking you. The nation or small group of nations that beats the others to the competition and defines the standards. To what extent have they weaponized that, whether intended or not, and to what extent do they have a big competitive advantage? Because if you set the standards, you're just a little bit ahead, then
Yeah,
so.
that's right.
Well,
You're either a little bit ahead or a lot ahead, and that depends on the field, and how important that technology is globally and what the market is, right? A little ahead in an area like communications technology can be a really big impact on your companies. It can cause some companies to fail, so it can have a really big impact. Now, what I will say about international standards, and I said a lot about international standards, but what I want to say is that, the U.S. has a strategy where we welcome everybody to the table. To me, that's really important. I think the worst thing that can possibly happen is China deciding that they're going to develop regional standards and they're only going to use those and they're not going to play on the global level, right? It would be bad if the United States did that, right? I think it would be terrible for the global economy if we all did that. So that's why I think this inclusivity is so important, just making sure everybody has a voice. You want the best technical solutions. And that's again why I say the R&D, the national standard strategy is so brilliant, because it focuses first saying you need to be the best, do the best research in the world so you can come up with the best technical solutions. And that way, when you are competing, collaborating at the standards table, you are strong. You're coming from a strong position because you've done all this great work to bring you there. So I think just making sure we can keep that open, collaborative, and compete head-to-head with the best technical solutions. We just need to have the best technical solutions. Yeah.
Bill?
Did I answer your question, by the way? Sort of. Oh, no.
Advantageous it is to a single-minded
He said he didn't know how advantageous does that work against an autocratic government? I think it works very well, provided we don't start pulling out of standards bodies, provided we're all there at the table. So there was a BIS rule that came out that basically prevented U.S., it put barriers up to U.S. participating when certain companies that were on the entities list were participating. What that did was it made us we weren't able to be at the same table. BIS ended up getting a lot of feedback from that. We worked with them very carefully. We're sister agencies in the Department of Commerce. A lot of great people over there. We worked together and then took that out of the rule. Because even if we're talking about a critical technology and a company is on the entity list, we still want to not be excluded. We don't want to be excluded, right? We don't want people to be excluded. We need to have that conversation. We need to come to the best technical solution together. So I don't know if that's any clearer.
Okay, I'm Bill Phillips. I'm from NIST, so I'm one of Laurie's boys.
Yay!
Okay, China.
Yeah.
So the story that is often told with respect to China, or really the rest of the world, is we in the U.S., we have the best fundamental research. We get things done first, and we have that advantage because we're a little bit ahead because we made it. And then by the time it becomes a commodity, it's done elsewhere, and maybe with chips, that wasn't such a good idea, and now we're going to try to get them back. So part of my question is, what about the rest of the economy where that has happened again and again, or at least that's the story that is told? And part of the story is we attract the very best students to come to our universities because we have the best graduate program in the world, and the best of them stay. Now, I'm starting to see that that's not happening, that some of them are going back where they came from. for any number of reasons. I mean, we had a great student, went to a U.S. university from the JQI, went to a U.S. university, and then was seduced by the offers of China. And we advised him, you're not going to like being told what to do instead of setting your own agenda. But he went anyway. And should I be as scared as I am? And what are we going to do about it?
You know, that that was a deliberate pause. That's a tough question, Bill. You know, we have competed so well for so long. And that's why I said, now that things are changing, you're right. People are going back various places around the world where they came from, right? Not just to China, but they're coming here, studying, going home. I was in a meeting the other day for the semiconductor industry, and it was an awards ceremony, and they said, I think they said that 55% of the leaders there who were winning awards were not from this country originally. It's a big deal. The solution, though, it probably is going to take a bunch of really smart people to sit around and think about what are the possibilities, because we have got to make sure we don't lose that advantage. We still do. At the table, you were talking about American know-how, right? People love that. American know-how, that's what we're known for. We were talking about German engineering, American know-how, you know, about these various ways that we get labeled. That's a great thing, and I think we haven't lost that. What we've lost is this really incredible, years ago when we offshored so many things, we lost the ability to, what I would say, iterate. Like, we were in the manufacture, we were making these things, we were engineering these things. We had researchers working with the engineers in the factories. And so you could see where the gaps were, how to improve. And you know, it's a virtuous cycle that we've kind of lost. That's not going to necessarily solve the problem that you're talking about, which is how to retain talent. But I will say that it is part of what we're trying to solve right now, is making sure we can bring that back, so there's exciting research to do on the technology that we lost. There's so much more to do, right? There's AI chips, there's photonics integration, there's just so many fun things that you can do. There's quantum devices. So we just need to stay ahead of it this time. You know, I'll also say that it's a clear goal of mine and ours, collectively at NIST, I believe, to make sure we don't make that mistake again with emerging technologies. I really think that all of us have to think about that, right? There are vulnerabilities here because these are young companies who don't have the capital and they can't make the payments, and then they could get bought out, or they could fold, and they could just lose the IP. I mean, there's so many things that could happen, so we have to be really careful about not repeating this, and especially with these young technologies. I wandered all over with yours, and I didn't answer the question of how are we going to keep talent here. That's a hard one. You need to think about that for me, with me. How about that?
Let's go to the red microphone.
Thank you, Larry. Timothy Thomas, I am a member. This is kind of a fuzzy question, and I'm not sure it is a question.
I've had fuzzy answers, so it's perfect.
All right, we're all set. I'm noting that there is an enormous revolution in military technology, with the drones dominating the battlefield. As a result, thousands of private companies and essentially every military in the world is reallocating its resources to drones. Mm-hmm. What role is NIST going to play in this suddenly exploding new use of a kind of an old technology?
Specifically with how we do work in drones and robotics, and particularly we look at the development of the testing of robotic systems and drones to find out their accuracy, their spatial accuracy, how well you can control them, how they can be deployed and used in different applications. So we collaborate a lot across the different agencies to look at really what I would say determining how well these work, but also how well they work in different applications. So we have a lot of activity in that area. As a matter of fact, we're going to have groundbreaking on a new robotics facility in a couple weeks, I think. So it's a very active area for NIST.
Mark Saul, I'm a member. I sort of gleaned this from your talk, but can you articulate the difference in philosophy and mission between NIST, NSF, NIH, NSA, which seem to overlap?
Yeah. I would
Leave it on, Mark. Just leave it on. Thank you.
I'll give you an example of the difference. So ours is really about measurement science and promoting innovation through measurement science, right? Making better measurements. So anywhere where there's a problem, people can't make the measurement to improve their technology, to improve their discovery. That's where NIST plays. Now, that's a big space. So we actually don't exclude very much. If you need to make a measurement, Now the interesting thing is, years ago, we were debating all over government, should NIST be involved in biology? Should NIST be involved? There's NIH. NIH is there. They're biology. We don't need NIST. And then I ended up talking to the NIH director at that time, and I told him what we wanted to do for the biosciences. Make better measurements to improve your ability to make your discoveries. And he's like, we don't want to do that. And so it kind of became very clear that they wanted us to do it. So even in many different places, like people don't think of NIST as a climate change research, right, organization. But we work with the NOAA and we work with NASA to deploy new sensors and satellites, to develop new ways to measure carbon capture. And that's because they're having problems doing that kind of measurement. They come to us, and that's a really natural collaboration. So I would say that we have a really unique mission that is understood by a lot of agencies, but not all. Sometimes you have to ask them, do you really want to do this part? Because we do this really well. And they're like, yeah, we don't want to do that. So.
This question is from Joel, a member. The 5G networks seem to combine a lot of technologies. Has NIST considered using 5G networks to test and improve AI, machine learning, and SDN technologies to solve other technology issues?
Yeah, so we do have a lot of cross-collaboration between our programs in 5G and beyond. We have a NextG consortium that we do research in, and they are working. And as a matter of fact, they're working in the NextG consortium and also the Spectrum Sharing Consortium. We're working with our AI experts, for instance, to solve problems with interference in spectrum. So we do deploy AI in multiple solutions that we're developing. So it's really nice cross-collaborations across NIST.
Second question?
It's actually from me, Larry. I'm Janice Surratt, and I'm a member. I wanted to ask you if you could elaborate on what NIST is doing to support and bring back biopharma manufacturing to the U.S. in general and specifically in generics.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So what we are doing right now, and we have been doing for many years, is developing the standards, working very, very closely with industry. We've had industry roundtables for probably 10 years on antibody-based therapeutics to assure the quality of therapeutics made in the country and to assure the quality of generics as well, right, as things go off patent. That's really important. And so we work with other agencies, obviously the agencies who you would expect, who are responsible for quality of those kinds of drugs. But we've also worked extensively with industry to find out what they need, like what they need at what time. Now, the bigger question there is a harder one. How do we bring that back? I mean, it is a lot like the CHIPS problem. And within government, we are talking a lot about how to make sure that biopharmaceuticals are actually manufactured here, not just innovated here, but manufactured here. And it's a subject of a lot of conversation around government, but it's not dissimilar in that a lot of the manufacturing went offshore.
I wanted to go back to the issue of standards. And I think one aspect that can, in a sense, prevent this autocracy of standards, so let's say China dominating, is a key word that you mentioned at one point called interoperability, because manufacturing is no longer vertical,
Right.
and you need to interoperate in terms of parts and everything. So I wanted your comments on that, and I was going to also talk about 5G and beyond 5G. So there are IEEE, for example, is working in the next generation networks, and actually I participate. It used to be, now it has become a technical committee, and I think it's an opportunity to work with NIST in terms of standards, because we do talk about things that can lead to standards. And I wanted to know if there are other professional societies. I can think of the ASME, the American Society of Mechanical Engineers, which will be another great society in terms especially of manufacturing, advanced manufacturing and so on. So your thoughts on that, please.
Yeah, so that is, so we do work with all those, all of the different societies that are involved with standardization, and it is a way to really bring us together with the industry, because the industry is already there. It's usually a lot of industry consortia there, already iterating on the ideas to bring to the standards table. The great thing is involving through those organizations is we can sometimes say, you know, here's a place we aren't ready to come with a solution yet. Let's all go away together and do something, do some research together, and that's an awesome way that NIST can work. I'll just foot stomp what you said about interoperability and the verticals. So yeah, that's absolutely right on. Yeah.
We'll go back to the web for a question.
This question is from Edward Gadasu, a member. What would it take to incentivize the increase in the number of federally funded research and development centers, perhaps from the private sector?
I'm sorry, I missed that first part. How to incentivize, or how to?
What would it take to incentivize the increase in the number of federally funded research and development centers?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. So NIST has its first federally funded research and development center. Our first FFRDC we launched just, I want to say maybe 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and it's around cybersecurity. It's the National Cybersecurity Center of Excellence. You know, we did that because we really wanted a collaborative there where we could all come together in an open environment and solve sector-based problems associated with cybersecurity. You know, we don't have barriers on forming FFRDCs, and there's a lot of, but I do think there's important times when you need to use them, important times when it's probably not the best vehicle. But I think for us, it has been a tremendous vehicle to do our work in cybersecurity. And we talk about, are there other opportunities to have FFRDCs around some of the other areas that we're working with, particularly where we want to have a large collaborative come together. There are advantages too, because FFRDCs can pay different salaries as well.
So I'll add a question here. This isn't the first time that the U.S. Semiconductor manufacturing industry has found itself in a kind of a crisis. And the last time, which I guess is 30 or 40 years ago, they formed, with the help of the government, a consortium called Semitech.
Yeah.
And to what extent is that a good model for some of the things you're trying to do, or is it solving a different problem?
You know, it's interesting. Semitech has had its wins and it has had its losses. We are looking at all of that, talking to people who were there, talking to people who just have studied it. A lot of people have studied why it was so successful and then why it ultimately waned. And so we're definitely trying to make sure we get lessons learned from that. There are definite successes that came out of Semitech. We all know that, right?
It faded in the end, but I think it fell victim a little bit to its own success. But the other thing is that, kind of as an outsider with a 30,000 foot look at the semiconductor manufacturing industry, it's extremely dynamic and unpredictable. We're looking now, a lot of the offshoring took place because of economic factors and also because of a shift in the way the industry is working. At one time, Intel was an integrated electronics manufacturer that designed and manufactured its chips. And then the industry specialized, and the manufacturing of the chips got offshored for the most part, but the design remained here.
Yes.
And then we have the problem, not problem, but the shift to reduced instruction set chips, which are really a lot of them coming out of ARM in the UK. And so that also affected the industry. And now we're in the middle of NVIDIA and the graphics chips being used for AI. Again, a huge shift in the industry. So I think you have, in addition to the general challenge that you have a tremendously dynamic field that you have to guess where it's going, and you have to deal with the economics. And I guess that's really my question is, a lot of this stuff is driven by economics.
Yeah.
How much does it cost to build a fab? How much does it cost to staff it? How much does it cost to run it? How many regulations do you have to comply with? And some of those things drove companies to set up shop overseas. Aside from throwing money at it, how do we change the environment here so that it's easier to make a fab, easier to staff it, the labor costs are competitive, et cetera?
So those are questions that we debate internally, but also with the community over the last year. There are so many things, nuances, right, to bringing back the industry, but then keeping them here. I emphasized that R&D was really important. That's one thing that's really important. There's a multiplicity of things going on. One of the things they talked to us about when I visited a large international company recently was our workforce. Will we have the right workforce? So we talk about building the right workforce, and they said, well, in their fab, they have 70% of the people have a bachelor's, and the majority of those have a master's or PhD, and that's in the fab. That's not true of all global companies, but really trying to make sure that we have the workforce that can keep them here. Again, another very important piece of the puzzle. And so but there are many things. We're working right now. We have a whole group focused on NEPA, right, environmental regulation. We have a whole group focused on workforce. We've hired about 150 people in the CHIPS program, anywhere from economists to people straight from Wall Street who've done deals all their lives, the largest financial sector or houses in the world, to science and technologists who have been part of the semiconductor industry since it was born. I mean, we have a lot of people cogitating on these different issues, trying to figure out how to really streamline, a lot of attorneys, streamline and make sure that we can not only attract them here with these incentives, but also try to get match, so it's not just federal dollars, but it's also leveraged against private dollars, and then how to retain them by trying to make the workforce available, helping with the NEPA regulation, and multiple other work streams that we're working on. But I made it sound simple. You just laid out many of the complexities I didn't point out. It's not a straightforward problem, but I think we got a lot of good brains on it. Anybody else who wants to work on it with us? We're always looking for good people. It's a great team. Exciting time to be here.
We're certainly all rooting for you and appreciate the hard work that you're doing, and it's a big challenge. So I think there are no more questions. Oh, there is a question.
Hello, Brett Magrum. I'm a member. I was just curious, as either a percentage of GDP or the federal budget, when was NIST funding the highest? I'm going to just take a blanket stab 1960 or something, and I was assuming it's probably been decreasing. And I would ask for an explanation of why that is.
NIST funding actually has been going like this. So
As a percentage of GDP and
as
budget?
a percentage of
Or
GDP.
budget?
I'm sorry, I don't have that calculation. It'd be good to match. No, but we have benefited from good budgets. But not as I haven't ever done the calculation as a percentage of GDP. I'm sorry about that. It would be good mapping to do, and I'll do that. I will say, though, that we have a lot of supporters in Congress because of the work that we do, which is really, it's nonpartisan, it's non-political, it's very much let's serve the needs of the nation. And so often we do get additional things like acts, new laws that call on NIST to do new things without additional money. But the confidence in us is there, and I think people fight for our appropriations, which I'm really happy about and thankful for. But your question is a good one.
I'll add a footnote to that. I don't know if it's been going down since then, but in the Clinton administration, there was a major increase of funding for NIST.
For NSF, NIST, and the DOE labs, we were all on a doubling of our budget. Yeah, on that trajectory, it was correct. Yeah.
So if there are no more questions, and it appears that we are wrapping up here, I want to thank you so much for giving this talk and coming and spending time with us. And in a token of thanks, we have 3 gifts for you. One is a framed copy of the announcement of your talk, signed by all the members of the General Committee on behalf of all of the membership and everybody who attended tonight. Another is a copy of Volume 1 of the Philosophical Society, the Bulletin of the Philosophical Society of Washington, which for those of you who are confused, PSW stands for Philosophical Society of Washington. And you'll find in there the original members and why they founded it, and a very nice statement about how science dialogue should be conducted, which is with histrionics and pounding of the table. No, civilly but unyieldingly in your questioning. And finally, a rosette, which is the Society's emblem, and it incorporates into it the symbol for the Henry, because our founder was Joseph Henry. So with that, I really thank you again.
You know, may I just say, you're delightful. I mean, you are a delightful audience. I'm a 4 o'clock in the morning kind of person. I wake up early, and I thought, oh, I'm going to be tired tonight. But you're incredible. You gave me a lot of energy, so thank you.
Well, thank you. Yeah. But I think it came from you. Okay, before you go, we have a few closing announcements. The next meeting will be the 2,483rd meeting, and it will be on October 20th, and the speaker will be Pri Narang. She is a professor in the Department of Chemistry and Biochemistry at UCLA. She'll be speaking on shining new light on quantum matter. Her lecture will discuss the challenges of studying, modeling, and harnessing non-equilibrium quantum systems for computation, communication, and other applications. So to some extent, that talk has something to do with this talk. And we've actually had a couple of other talks that you might be interested in listening to, particularly, I think, Lily Chen's talk on cybersecurity. And, well, age is getting me, so I can't remember the names of the people I want to tell you about. So please go to our website and look at some of the talks of the last year that relate to these subjects. The 2,484th meeting will be on November 3rd. The speaker will be Ted Schultz, curator of Hymenoptera at the Smithsonian National Museum of Natural History. As some of you may know, Hymenoptera comprise the ants, wasps, bees, and sawflies. There are over 150,000 living species of Hymenoptera that have been described, and 2,000 extinct ones. A variety of these are agriculturalists. And Ted will be speaking about the convergent evolution of agriculture and species other than humans that are pretty good farmers. The 2,485th meeting will be on November 17th. The speaker will be Bob Truog of Harvard, and he will be speaking about defining death, including considerations of science, medicine, belief, and law. In part because of legal definitions, differences in legal definitions, a person legally dead in California may be legally alive in New Jersey. And in fact, this has actually been an issue where a child was declared dead in California and the family didn't want the child to be dead. So they transported her to New Jersey where she was declared alive. So resurrection actually can happen, if only in the law. In any case, the subject involves a complex mix of competing viewpoints, and politicians, lawyers, scientists, doctors, cultures, religions, philosophers, and ethicists, and is a microcosm of how these differences can be reconciled and resolved, or not, in our democratic, diverse, and multi-jurisdictional society. Please check the PSW website often for up-to-date information on meetings and lectures. Before you go, let's thank our crew, Camille Lance for preparing the minutes, Janice Soreth for reading the minutes and managing the room and for handling the chat from the live stream. Robin Taylor, who's always back there where she can't be seen, who does the video and takes care of the sound and makes sure the live stream is running correctly. Brett Magaram, who actually ran a camera and didn't do the live stream and chat, but we have to adapt when somebody doesn't show up, and Andrew Gunn didn't show up. So Lloyd Mitchell ran the other camera, and Bill Mitchell, who's related to Lloyd Mitchell, will be editing, but he hasn't done anything yet. And then there's me. Finally, let me just say, be a contributor. PSW is run entirely by volunteers, and we could use some more volunteers. We have a lot of things that need to be done, and we have a lot of opportunities that we haven't been able to fully take care of. For instance, we have an opportunity to publish the PSW bulletin again, and we need somebody who can handle getting the manuscripts written and editing them. In addition, we need the usual help with setting up and packing up equipment. All this equipment you see here, that's our cameras, our tripods, the cabling, and everything else, is primarily laid out by me and Robin, and with some help from other people. So we could certainly use some help with that. We could use mic runners, people to run the cameras, monitor the live stream, use help with social media and doing more tweeting on the social media known as X, that was formerly known as Twitter, etc. So please, let me plead with you, come see me and volunteer to help. And also, give us money. And with that, I will entertain a motion to adjourn the 2,482nd meeting to the social hour. There's cheese and beverage in the back. Bob, of course, is ready with the motion, and I have a second. And all members in favor? Aye. All members opposed? Well, hearing none, the meeting is unanimously adjourned to the social hour.